Well, first thing is I just want to make a couple opening remarks. Just a reminder to everyone out there that the parade will start at noon on Sunday versus 10 a.m. due to combination of our churches and services. As well, a reminder to council, we have the float, we have the cake cutting, so hopefully you all can make it. And the last thing is the Chamber of Commerce needs a couple volunteers for patrols, actually just to help along the parade route, just to make sure that kids are safe and that kind of thing. So if you're interested in volunteering for a couple hours that day, just contact Marley or Heather at the Chamber of Commerce. And I heard the Grand Fondo went well, Darren?
Yeah, it went very well despite the weather. They lost a few riders, but what I mean lost, they didn't come because of the weather.
They didn't get lost in the Badlands?
No, they had well over 600 riders again this year, so great job by all.
That's awesome. Well, great job by BCF and everybody else involved. All right, so now I must call the public hearing to order, and I will state the matter of the public hearing. Public hearing June 25th, 3.1. The purpose of the public hearing is to consider bylaw 06.18 being a bylaw to acknowledge the new federal legislation which will legalize cannabis by amending the town's land use bylaw with the required definitions. So, do we have any written submissions, Linda? None? Does any of the public wish to speak to indicate whether they are speaking in favor or in opposition of the matter? We have two.
Sorry, Mary, you missed the planning report from Palliser.
Oh, geez, I just bumped right over you two. I'm just too damn efficient. Okay, I'll let you guys have your thing first.
So, good afternoon, Mayor Kohlberg and members of council. My name is Devin Diano. I'm a planner with Palliser Regional Municipal Services. And today I'm going to be doing a presentation on bylaw 06-18, which is a proposed bylaw to amend land use bylaw 10-08 to incorporate provincial and federal cannabis legislation changes. So to start out, I'm going to go around I'm going to look at a bit of background information on federal and provincial legislation and what that means for municipal regulations. Then we're going to talk about the purpose of the amendment, go through an evaluation and analysis of the proposed bylaw, and then end off with a conclusion and recommendation for council. So to start, the official legalization date for cannabis has been set for October 17th, 2018. So this is going to come through two proposed bills, which is Bill C-45, the Proposed Cannabis Act, as well as BC 46, an act to amend the criminal code. So the regulatory responsibilities at the federal level will include cannabis production and cultivation, distribution, advertising, possession limits, age limits, medical cannabis, trafficking, and impaired driving. At the provincial level, the regulatory responsibilities are going to include wholesale and retail distribution, cannabis retail licensing, minimum retail separation distance from schools and hospitals, which we'll get into more detail in a little bit, as well as workplace safety, retail building security, and the provincial government also has the discretion to set more restrictive limits on minimum age and possession amounts. So this is all going to occur through Bill 26, which is amendment to the Alberta Gaming and Liquor Act, and regulations and licensing will be controlled by the Alberta Gaming and Liquor Commissions. And that bill has received third reading and it's currently awaiting royal assent. So what does this mean for municipal governments? So the regulatory responsibilities for municipal governments will be zoning and location, development, regular business licensing, building codes, nuisances, smoking restrictions, and enforcement. So for the purpose of today, we're focusing on cannabis regulations from a land use perspective. So we're looking at zoning and location and development, which will be addressed through Land Use Bylaw 10-08. So the purpose of the proposed amendment is to prepare for the legalization of cannabis by regulating the location of cannabis retail stores in Drumheller. So under the current land use bylaw, cannabis retail stores would be able to locate in any district where retail sales is currently a permitted use. So how do we regulate the location of cannabis stores? We amend the land use bylaw to include definitions for cannabis and cannabis uses. We choose which land use districts will allow cannabis stores, and we add general regulations for cannabis stores. So now getting into an evaluation of the bylaw, the definitions that will need to be changed includes retail store, and we'll be adding to the end of this definition to say that this definition does not include cannabis retail sales. Definitions to be added. First, we'll start with general definitions for cannabis and cannabis accessory. And then we'll be adding a definition for cannabis cafe, which means a development where the primary purpose of the facility is the sale of cannabis to the public for consumption within the premises, and which is authorized by provincial and federal legislation. So when provincial and federal legislation gets passed on October 17th, this type of establishment won't be legal yet, but we have included it just to be proactive and include it as a definition and start to look at regulating where something like this could be. Because it is expected that it could come in the near future. So, and then lastly, we have a definition for cannabis retail sales, which means a retail store licensed by the province of Alberta, where cannabis and cannabis accessories are sold to individuals who attend the premises. Next, the proposed amendment will provide appropriate land use districts for cannabis stores. So cannabis retail sales and cannabis cafes will be added as discretionary uses in the Central Commercial District, Downtown Transition District, and the Highway Commercial District. So provincial legislation includes separation distances. The provincial legislation requires a minimum of 100-meter separation distance from schools, as defined in the Schools Act, school reserve or municipal and school reserve land, and hospitals, as defined in the Hospitals Act. And local governments have the ability to expand the separation distances and add additional regulations. So currently there's no required separation distance from daycare centers in the provincial legislation, unless the daycare offers a formal education program, and then it would technically fall under the definition of a school. So, however, separation from daycares may be included under the general land use regulations at the discretion of town council. And we've been directed by administration to treat the separation distances and the general land use regulations the same way that you guys treat liquor stores. So we have included a 300-meter separation from any other cannabis retail stores. So that's not a provincial requirement, but that's the same way you treat liquor stores in Drumheller. We've also included a 150-meter separation from any building or parcel of land containing a school. So that's a 50-meter increase from the provincial requirement, and that's also how you treat liquor stores. And then a 150-meter separation from any parcel of land designated as school reserve or municipal and school reserve. So that's a 50-meter increase from the provincial requirement. And then lastly, a 100-meter separation from hospitals. and that meets the provincial minimum requirement. So next we'll get into a bit of mapping. So this is just an example of potential parcels that could have cannabis retail stores. When we were making this map, we did miss Hope Community College as well as Bedrock Play School, and I believe you guys have another map that shows those two on there, and I'll pull that map up shortly, but first we'll go through this one here. So this is just a quick overview, and this is what Northwest Drumheller would look like. So there's a 150-meter separation from St. Anthony's and a 100-meter separation from Drumheller Health Center. And then central downtown, there's a 150-meter buffer around Drumheller Outreach School. And then southeast Drumheller, which includes St. Luke's Outreach Center, Green Tree Elementary, and Drumheller Valley Secondary School. So I'll pull up the additional map now. Yeah, so this map also shows facilities such as Drumheller Aquaplex and Splash Park, as well as the Badlands Community Facility, although provincial legislation does not require separation from these buildings. And then it also shows Drumheller associated physicians. So I'm not entirely sure if this would fall under the definition of hospitals, but that's one of those definitions that is kind of up to interpretation, so it's hard to look at it and make those choices. Yeah. So when issuing a development permit, it'd be at the discretion of the development authority to decide whether those separation distances are met or not. So in conclusion, the proposed bylaw would change the Drumheller land use LUB to regulate the location of cannabis stores by updating definitions, allowing cannabis stores as discretionary uses in the central commercial, downtown transition, and highway commercial districts, and by setting general land use regulations. And as a final recommendation, in order to regulate the location of cannabis stores in Drumheller, Palliser Regional Municipal Services recommends that City Council approve the proposed bylaw 06-18 to amend land use bylaw 10-08. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Devin. Okay, so Linda, you had no written submissions, and we have two in the public that want to speak. Do you want to give your names to Linda? Council, are there any objections to those wishing to speak? Okay. And do we have any opposition to the bylaw? JD? No, just get names, sorry. But you're okay. Okay. Okay, so what we will do here, those in favor of the bylaw speak first, and they're given 10 minutes to present their position. Each person must state their name. So we don't have any in favor, we just have 2 opposed. Okay, so those in opposition speak second and are given, oh, we have something. They're both opposition, okay. Okay, so those in opposition, which are you 2, speak second and are given the 10 minutes to present your position. So if I could get them to come forward and allow that space, Justin and Devin, thank you.
For the record, I am JD, and
My name is Patrick Parsons.
so I've been deeply involved the last few years in the medical cannabis world. I've been in dispensaries right from Vancouver Island all the way to Ontario. I've seen some pretty horrible ones, and I've seen some ones that have basically, to me, showed me what the industry standard of a retail cannabis dispensary would and should look like. Um, my main concern with the bylaw, it's, this is fantastic. We're even looking at this right now. It's the 150-meter buffer zone. I'm not sure. I don't have control of the machine there, but if you bring up the map and look at the downtown area, it makes it gosh darn near impossible for anybody who's looking at doing a dispensary in the downtown core. And just in terms of the other areas, I think there may be a few more options to potentially look at outwards towards NAC. I'm not saying NAC mine, but outwards on the main highway drag there where the veterinarian clinic is in that industrial area. And I know there had been concerns made from RCMP. It's been brought to my knowledge in the past that liquor stores had tried to go up there, but they didn't like the idea of not being able to monitor them, and which is understandable. But at least leaving the highway, right there on the highway. I'm not saying give us permission to go into the back 40 there, but to be right on the main drag there. I've been working with a real estate gentleman in town quite closely, trying to find. I'm a musician, so I'm not very. I don't have much money, and I wanted to be in an area where, by the time we've adhered to the regulations on security on the GLC website, by the time we've adhered to all the rules and regulations that they've set forth in terms of how we're going to run a dispensary, how it needs to look, right from having a separation from the front entrance into the back area. And I think that if it would be possible, if you guys would look to rethink the 150-meter buffer zone and look at the 101 with what the AGLC set forth. I'm not sure Pat wants to add to that.
Yeah, I would agree. Adding 50 meters to the existing 100-meter zone really eliminates most of the downtown core for a dispensary. My point of view is I will just let you know that I'm also a medical cannabis patient, and I'm a cannabis advocate and activist with the Calgary Cannabis Club. And I've been involved with 420 organizations, the Global Marijuana March, along with many other cannabis-related events. And I've done a fair amount of research into cannabis and cannabis safety. And cannabis is one of the safest substances on the planet. It's far safer than tobacco, and it's far safer than liquor. And pretending that we need huge buffer zones to protect people from cannabis is perpetuating a myth and a stereotype that cannabis is dangerous. And cannabis is not dangerous. It's actually probably the most beneficial single plant on the planet. So adding 50 meters just further perpetuates a stereotype that you need to be extra careful with cannabis.
Anything else?
Well, I think Drumheller has a chance here to do this constructively and creatively and have a dispensary, maybe even more than one dispensary in the downtown core. That would not only draw people and tourists to the downtown core, which has been an ongoing problem in Drumheller, but it would also show that the town doesn't have agenda of perpetuating a stereotype against cannabis users.
Okay, council, got any questions? Tom.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to who came up with this idea of the 150-meter buffer. Like who came up with that?
I think in the Palliser report, Your Worship, it's clear that it's just mirroring our already existing alcohol in terms of liquor store rules. If perhaps Cindy, if you want to weigh in on that.
Those rules were created years ago for the liquor stores because there seemed to be an influx of liquor stores. It's something MPC requested at the time. And to be honest, I don't think that anyone ever did a map showing the 300-meter buffer until the cannabis debate came in. And when we saw that 300-meter buffer, we realized how unrealistic it was. There's no way. I mean, you'd have one store, really, in town. So,
Jay?
Going forward, since we have public hearings so infrequently, it's hard to remember how things go. And we actually don't have the agenda in front of us, just you do. Is there an opportunity to ask questions of Palliser at some point?
It doesn't state it here, but I'm sure we do after this, yes?
Because I
That's,
okay.
yeah.
At some point later down the agenda? Yeah. Okay. So I don't really have questions for the gentleman. I really just wanted to point out that there's no agenda. It's merely a starting point, and all they could use as a reference point is the only thing similar that's been done in the past, and that was in relation to liquor stores. So we're absolutely open to hearing rationale for why it needs to be different. Yeah. Well, I think the mapping shows that.
If we realistically take a look at the dangers of alcohol and tobacco as compared to the dangers of cannabis, you'll quickly realize that the substances that we're already selling are far more dangerous than the ones that we're debating on their location right now. Many more people have suffered illness and death due to alcohol and tobacco-related illnesses than cannabis. Not one person on this planet, there's not one documented case of a cannabis death or injury from using cannabis.
Okay, council, anybody else? No? So do you guys have anything else you want to add?
I just want you to know that I do intend on coming in, and I've been holding off for an awful long time to adhere to the AGLC regulations. And right on their website, it states that you must have your town's permission. You need to have a development permit. You need that kind of stuff. And I didn't want to go ahead and do anything like that without having everybody that's involved in this community on board. Personally, if this 100-meter buffer zone, 150-meter buffer zone could be relooked, I know this is just the beginning of I'm sure a long summer of heated debates here. Well, cool debates, actually. They're quite nice. But I think if you guys could have an opportunity to relook that over, know that I do think that it can be a good thing for the community. I plan on naming my company Badland Bud. And I'm looking at potentially doing, which is, I've done music festivals for years. That's what I know. Stick to what you know. And I see the background of the Drumheller Valley, and I see a massive fest, Badland Bud Fest 2019, where we got 50,000 people coming into the city to, I got big dreams, but you got to start somewhere, right? And basically, I like to see this as a growing step forward in the future. Thank you for taking your time to listen and hear me out.
Fred?
I just had a question about how your building's going to look. Like, are you? I just read an article about signage. Like, are we going to have kind of a generic dispensary sign, or are we going to be trying to attract and entice people? The second thing I have a concern with downtown is and this is me personally, doesn't reflect anybody else, but I'm beginning to worry about our Fort Apache Bronx closed down armored building kind of look we have in the evenings for our tourists. So how are you going to address security in your building after hours? Is it going to be internal bars or stuff? Because I'm really getting tired of seeing our downtown kind of close up for business in the evening.
Well, basically, I'd be following the AGLC regulations that's set forth when it comes to everything. Because before they'll approve you, they're going to come into that building and they're going to go through it 150%, and you get one shot. It's a non-refundable application fee, and it's up there, upwards of $4,500. And to not be prepared, anything that I do that would be considered extra would be to protect my employees. That's a huge concern. Just like liquor stores are a huge thing that are constantly looked at for robberies, and it's a quick rob. It's fast. They know there's money. They know there's booze. Either way, they're getting something they want. And I absolutely see something where that's going to be a concern in the future. So I've kind of looked at different options similar to the late night gas bar, because you are able to be open from 10 a.m. to 2 a.m., similar to a liquor store. And to have my employees safe, that's a big deal. And we're looking at having potentially 24-hour behind glass. I'm not sure how much of the regulations you've had a chance to check out online, but literally they are extremely thorough. Everything from, some of the dispensaries that I visited, you can go in and they'll have a case of jars, and they're see-through, and they can pop open the jar and you can smell each one. And the way the AGLC set this up is you come in, you show your ID before you even get let through the back room. So there's a secondary door. Once ID has been confirmed by a paid security guard, somebody who's trained to do that kind of thing, because I can't pick out ID, but a trained security guard to get them in there. And then once that happens, then the secondary door will be open into the back room, where we still have our cannabis products, but it still can't be, it's not going to be visual. The licensed producers, the packaging, as far as I know right now, the licensed producers have made it so that it's going to be pretty generic white packaging. You can't see into the thing. If you want to say, well, can I see that one there? You can't open it. I can't say, here, smell it. I can go down to the local liquor store now and say, what's that dill pickle vodka? Well, here, try some. And that's they've gone like above and beyond. You cannot have an employee working in that facility, not even since day one, unless they have their I guess it's like a pro serve for AGLCs. It's a bud tending license specifically. And in a liquor store, I can get hired in a liquor store tomorrow. And they have 30 days. The liquor store has 30 days with me as an employee to get my pro serve. That means there's a 30-day buffer zone where I'm not approved by the AGLC whatsoever in a liquor establishment. That's a big kind of window, personally. So like everything I do, like I said, money's tight, man. So when I do this and go in and do this, I want to do it right, and I want to do it thoroughly, and I want to make it so. Right now, our date's the 17th of October. So there's going to be a long time before there's product on the shelves. And touching on your signage, the AGLC originally, Bill C-46, it got sent back because they didn't want any shirts, any signage, anything. But then they kind of made the argument about, I can go to the liquor store and buy a case of beer, and I get a hat, and I get a cooler, and it's all branded and stuff. And but my thing is, I realize that Drumheller's tourism industry is people bringing their little kids to town, right? And I grew up here. I know what Drumheller's tourist industry is. So I'm not looking at setting up a red light district in the downtown community. The signage that we've worked on and developed, I can have it sent, and I'm not sure if there's an email where it can be sent through with what I plan on having. It is the name Badland Bud. The windows, because the back room at the location that I'm looking at now, with the 150 meter zone, it has the 2.5-inch thick steel doors I need. A lot of stuff that already adheres to the AGLC's regulations, but it's not within 150 meters of the outreach school. I think I'm the old gangster building in town, but there would be a separation, so all people walking down the street would see with young children is essentially a reception area, and it wouldn't be tacky. I wouldn't put up tacky stuff or nothing. It'd be very similar to what you would expect in a pharmacy. And I want people to feel like the thing is to end the stigma regarding cannabis, and give it a face that I know it can have. Thanks.
Anybody else? Okay. Oops, Tom.
Can we speak now, or are we?
Well, I was just going, if you had anything else, otherwise I'm going to get Palliser to come back up and we will. Yeah, so we'll deal with Palliser first. Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And we'll have Justin and Devin back up. And now, Jane, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks, guys. So, again, basing the template on just our existing structure for liquor stores, there, true or false, there's no planning function to requiring 300 meters between dispensaries, is there?
No.
And in fact, it's not even enforced in this community when it relates to liquor stores.
No, not that I know of.
Right. So I can think of 2 instances in town where there's stores closer together than 300 meters, certainly. And would you agree that from a planning perspective, that the 100-meter buffer, as required by the province, there's no planning advantage to having a 150-meter? It would all be about so-called safety concerns, but there's no distinct planning benefit for the additional 50 meters.
No, there wouldn't be.
Okay, and second last, because of what's the recommendations regarding highway commercial? Because as an example, we discussed at the open house how there's currently no provision, at least shown in the mapping, to allow the neighborhoods of East Cooley or Rosedale to see where they could incorporate such a business into their community. Do either of those 2 locations have highway commercial?
Those locations have local commercial, so that was omitted as just a preventative from having it in residential areas, but at town council's discretion, that could be.
So we would have the discretion there.
Yeah.
And the last clarification for me would be the provincial toolkit I saw, and that's where the interpretation comes in, refers to provincial health centers. It actually doesn't use the word hospital.
Right, so it says provincial health centers in the AGLC, but then it says as defined in the Hospitals Act. It's kind of confusing, and then you go into the Hospitals Act and you read it as a definition for a hospital, and then it just says any sort of facility that is helping someone or providing a medical service.
Right. So that's where the inclusion of the
so
medical clinics came, of which we have 2 now. And that's why I was curious about the interpretation. I mean, how broad does that interpretation get? I mean, the chiropractic office is licensed by the province medical facility.
Right.
But there's no. Is there any, in your experience, even though this is a brand new thing, in your experience so far, are there any communities that are expanding the definition of that beyond hospital?
Not that I've seen so far, no.
Okay. Thanks, guys. That's all I have.
Lisa.
Thanks for coming up tonight, guys. So I got a theoretical question for you. So in regards to educational facilities, we have Hope College, soon to be Badlands College. They've moved 3 times in the last 5 years, I want to say. So what per se would happen if that school relocated within 50 meters of a facility that was already approved and set up?
So that would turn into a licensing agreement that would be at the AGLC's, I guess, discretion to make a decision on that sort of thing. But from a municipal perspective, I'm not sure how you would regulate a change like that.
Okay, so I think at some point in time we might come across that.
Wouldn't we, so if the cannabis retailer has been located and then someone wants to locate next, they do have to go through MPC with a request to actually to locate there. So wouldn't the same condition apply but in reverse? Right? Like that's what I would think would happen, is that you would actually then tell the college that's wanting to relocate that they actually have to be at least 100 meters away from the cannabis retailer. Like I think that's the way I would look at it.
Okay.
Tom?
Sorry, I do have a couple more questions, but if it's in regards to that same vein of thought, go ahead. Okay.
Isn't this a non-starter from the beginning? This definition of school, as it relates to the provincial guidelines, does it include post-secondary?
Yeah, it does.
It does.
Yeah.
Okay.
I could read the definition for school. I have it written out if you guys would like to hear how they define it. So school means a structured learning environment through which an educational program is offered to a student by a board, an operator of a private school, an early childhood services program private operator, a parent giving a home education, or the minister. So that would also include homeschooling.
Lisa, do you have more?
I do. So my other question is regarding to medical dispensaries. Are they going to be treated the same or fall under that retail description?
That's one of those unknowns that we're not too sure about yet. So as far as I know, all medical cannabis is treated or regulated federally, so it's separate.
Okay, so then it would supersede any of our municipal bylaws.
Right.
Okay, perfect. And then I guess it probably isn't quite to the point here, but it seems like the legislation is going to include 4 plants per person for homegrown residential use. I'm just curious, has there been much thought in the way of you guys' organization as to how we should go ahead and deal with that as well?
Well, from a land use perspective, I don't think I can really speak to that. So yeah, I'm not sure I can answer that for you.
Okay. And the only reason I ask is because currently for medical marijuana users, I believe you're allowed to grow up to a certain amount of plants and you can supply to an outside source. So it's not just for personal use. So that's where I'm like, okay, defining retail, where does that fall under that umbrella? Yeah.
Basically, the way that works is it's you get an ACMPR license from Health Canada, and they'll approve you for about 4 plants per gram on your prescription, and you can get what's called a designated grower. So, for example, I personally have my license that I grow up per my medical card, and when it comes to that, say for example, if I'm in a position where I live in a perfect location, but happens in an apartment with kids in it, or something like that, it makes it so that through Mental Health Canada, we would both apply together, and I would be his designated grower. So there's no products being sold. There's no. It's absolutely you will lose your license, and for medical growers and for medical patients, cannabis right now, if it's currently extremely expensive. It's basically the same as street prices, and that's why we want it to be legalized, is to get that difference and knock off the street all together. But yeah, that's how they do that. So none of it's sold, but you can get a designated grower.
Thanks, JD.
So right now you can grow for yourself and one other person, or a designated grower that is not only for themselves and somebody who without a prescription could grow for 2 patients. So it's not like anybody is wanting to be growing massive amounts of cannabis for themselves and other medical patients. They really streamline that down to 2 people either at one location or at a third location. And as far as people that have prescriptions that are getting cannabis right now, they order it online and they get the cannabis sent in the mail.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. Thanks for allowing me to go down a tangent.
Tom?
Yeah, a couple things. Firstly, dental clinic. So that's going to be a medical facility.
I guess it'd be at the discretion of the development authority to make that decision, whether that dental clinic fell under their definition for hospital.
Because we have a new dental clinic coming downtown.
Right. In my personal opinion, I don't believe that it would fall under that definition.
We have denturists.
Right. So this is where it kind of gets into that discussion how some of these definitions are really difficult to interpret. So.
And my second question is the correlation between the map and the bylaw. We have on the map Drumheller Aquaplex, Splash Park, Badlands Community Facility. What pertinence are those to this bylaw at this time? Like they are on the bylaw, we have the zones around them.
Yeah, that wouldn't be part of the proposed bylaw. We had two separate maps. So Palliser did a few maps, but we weren't entirely sure of a couple of the school locations. And then Drumheller had created this map. So we were just trying to speak to both a bit because they both had a couple of different things. So we had a bit of confusion around the maps.
Can I just respond to that?
Yeah.
So that map was created. There was concerns that came from the chamber for the playgrounds, the BCF, the park, the spray park, and daycares. So we created that just to see what it would look like for the open house for ourselves as well as everyone else as a discussion item. Is this something that we want to include? Is this something that's going to be an issue? The old central school, there is a business district right across the street from that, where the little tiny tots, the playground outside, and that was a concern for them. So we wanted to just include it to show what it looked like.
So we're going to include playgrounds in our bylaw?
That's part of the discussion, I think.
But it's not in the bylaw as such.
Correct.
And neither is BCF or the Aquaplex or the Splash Park, according to the bylaw as it stands right now, right?
So as the bylaw is written currently, it only pertains to setbacks from schools, hospitals, and municipal reserve and school reserve land. So the maps were just examples to spur discussion, I guess. They're not a part of the bylaw. They're just for discussion. To show examples, yeah.
Anybody else? Lisa?
Do we have any municipal reserve land close to some of these areas? Is this like municipal environmental reserve? Okay, just school.
Reserve,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
So from going through the zoning, I couldn't find any that would, have an effect. So.
Okay, perfect.
Christine?
And sorry, just so I can understand this a little bit better. So the school definition, we have no power to say post-secondary 18 and over doesn't.
No.
This
so that's
is all provincially. That's what it goes.
Right.
Okay.
That's a provincial regulation, so we can't change.
Okay. Thanks.
Anybody else? Administration? No. Okay. I will therefore call this public hearing is closed now, and we will be adding that into the agenda. Okay, thank you all. So back to regular council meeting. Is there any additions and deletions to the agenda?
Yeah, yes, Your Worship. The one of the things that's omitted on here is actually the second reading for the land use bylaw proposed changes, and so I guess from we have a thought of if we make the changes to, or if we have the discussion today, we can have the changes made and back to council in 2 weeks' time. So, or we can take the longer time over the summer if that's the wishes of council and have second reading in 2 weeks.
Fred?
I would just say that the people we just were talking to have a lot to invest and plan and things like that. I think it would be probably better if we kind of worked our way through it quickly and gave people a chance to do their part to bring a healthy business to our town.
Okay, so we'll add that to 8.1.3.
Linda, does it? Sorry, Linda. Second reading goes under 12 under notice of motion
Okay, sorry.
or public hearing decisions. Okay, and 10.
So 10.1.
Thank you.
And reading. Oh, my law. Okay, anything else to add to the agenda? All right. Now,
I'll move the agenda as amended.
thank you. Can I have a seconder? Christine, all in favor? Carried. Can I have a motion to adopt the regular minutes of June 11th? Lisa, seconder. Fred, all comments? Sorry, all in favor? Carried. 5.2.1 Municipal Planning Commission meetings for information purposes. They are attached. And we shall move on to 8.1.1. Daryl.
Thank you, Your Worship. Excuse me. So, bring this in front of you. One of the outcomes of both the Economic Development Task Force as well as the Economic Development Group, the ones that have been meeting for a number of years, we talked about the downtown plaza and some of the attractions that we wanted to do for the 2018 season and beyond. The discussion was to try a events planner / coordinator to be able to try to bring more people downtown after hours on the weekends, set up things like board games or musical events and stuff like that. And so what I'm bringing before you is that we had those two things had come up over the last few months. However, we did not identify this in our budget this year as both a seasonal change, and we didn't. We just wanted to make everyone aware of a proposal to actually add this person to this for our summer, or request that this be added for the summer. So the money for this would come out of the $100,000 that we had set aside, or that had been proposed to be set aside earlier on. Of course, it had not been actually identified as an item to be tackled against. We had identified it there. However, we might be able to look at some other areas depending on cost savings with staffing in the organization. And we're looking at about $3,000 for programming for the summer as well. So some of it's salary costs and some of it is just simply the matters of buying supplies and doing advertising and some of the sort of ancillary requirements as part of that events planner. On the day we were writing this, or just about, we actually found that we actually were successful with some green jobs funding, of which it's very wide or loose as far as the requirements go. But basically, this includes things like people who would look after gardens, trailways where grasses are, as well as events planning and kind of downtown coordination. So we believe that we have 50% wage subsidy back from the federal government for this, so that's a positive for us. So, yeah, what we're looking for is, if approved, we would actually put the job descriptions actually written already. We could put the posting out tomorrow with the goal of being able to try to find someone within the next week or so to be able to start for the summer. So there are people out there that have expressed an interest in this already, and it had been discussed originally that the Chamber of Commerce would actually look at doing this. Community Futures had looked at doing this, but both of their groups had ultimately decided that they felt that they couldn't do that this summer with some of the other activities that were going on within their organization. So,
Can I get a motion, please? Jay?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that council approve the hiring of a seasonal events coordinator for the summer of 2018 in the amount of up to $10,000, which includes salary and program funding.
Seconder, Lisa? Comments? Tom?
Couple of comments. firstly, I'm not sure about the seasonal. I mean, one of the biggest events that we've had downtown in years and years has been the Festival of Lights in the winter. And so I don't like just the idea of somebody just doing stuff, seasonal. That would be my first comment. My second comment is also the motion doesn't say downtown events coordinator. It says events coordinator, which I kind of like that. I'm wondering why we want to just specify that this person would do downtown stuff. And I mean, that's fine if that's the intent. I guess my suggestion there would be, though, if we are going to basically pick on one particular area to promote, to spend money on, what participation do we have from the downtown businesses that are going to benefit from this? We talk about the chamber. Well, they don't have any money. But I mean, if we're going to just look at and focus on one area that will promote the businesses in that area over and above other businesses in Drumheller that aren't downtown, then I think the downtown businesses should buck up. I think they should have some money in this game, if that's going to be the intent. I applaud the idea of an events coordinator, but for the whole community, I like to see them, promote events in Nackmine and East Cooley and Rosedale and downtown and all over the place. I love that idea. But if we are just going to specify, well, this is just going to be for downtown, and it's just going to benefit those businesses downtown, and we're spending town money on that, there's something wrong there, because there are lots of other businesses in this community that aren't downtown and aren't going to benefit from this. So I would like to see some of the downtown businesses possibly come up with something for this.
Jay?
Thank you, Worship. I'm going to disagree with my learned colleague. I think the downtown business community has already signaled in the conversations that have been reported to council about the commitments they're making towards adjusting their hours. I think this motion puts our money where our mouth is about downtown revitalization. It was a specific, strategic goal. I'd like to see it. I'd like to be updated along the development of the plaza for this summer in terms of what we are going to do and when we can expect to see it, to see that these two things go hand in hand and show the downtown business community that we were serious. And I'm okay with it being limited to this. I mean, we're talking about just 2 months right now, and I wouldn't be interested in looking at adding another full-time staff with only this focus. But I'm very pleased to see this position before us for approval, because A, it gets it off the mayor's plate, which I don't think is where it belonged, and B, it's with a funding subsidy from the feds as well. It's incredibly affordable. It makes only the minorest of dents in the money that we had earmarked, even though we haven't funded, but earmarked for the recommendations from the task force. It's a quick win to show the task force that we're moving on their recommendations. And I'm fully in favor of it as presented.
Fred?
Well, I'd have to say I agree with you, Jay. I want to know that. I think that we have to know that that this is a bootstrapping kind of an effort that we're taking part in, and I think that it has to start someplace. And I understand, Tom, what you're saying about investment and things, but I think that as leaders in the community, we just have to get that bootstrapping started, and I think that that's what this will do. I agree that we're supporting the task force, but also our economic development committee itself, who's put so much work into trying to revive our downtown and things like that. I would like to see the cooperation with other events so that Wayne Fest and Spring Fest kind of work together with their downtown, maybe bring performers into the downtown and then in turn promote them. And I think there's a way that this will work with the outlying areas without necessarily lending that expertise, have to go out and organize them, but rather include them as a part of the activities and the cross promotion.
Lisa?
I think it's a great idea. Speaking from my past experience of having a business downtown for almost 11 years, we used to do sundown Saturdays. Downtown merchants would get together. Well, not all of us, maybe Mike Toter, and we'd all get together and they make programs all day Saturday. And I can't count the amount of people that came through my door because there was something going on downtown. It was phenomenal. And I kind of disagree a little bit about the thought from my colleague in regards to nobody else benefiting from this. If we can get those tourists to stay, not just in downtown, but stay in Drumheller and give them something to do, we all benefit. So spending $10,000, not even $10,000 to help promote our downtown core to bring life back into our community in that aspect is a great investment. I know John Schaff a number of years ago did a motocross event for it was either Family Day or some such downtown, and the turnout was phenomenal. And that was one man getting the troops together and making this community a better place. So I have full faith that somebody in 2 months focusing on the downtown will be a benefit for all.
Christine?
Would this potentially be the start for the revival of a festival committee then? If we have a person in command that can maybe get the committee going as well?
It's possible that would be done. What goes through my head as I'm listening to council is that I'm a big fan of Edward Deming, that's your homework for tonight. But he had a big idea about sort of where before you just rush into something, you kind of plan, do, study, act. And so I look at this as kind of, this is the pilot for us to see whether or not this is going to be successful or not. We all think this is going to be a great activity, a great opportunity for us. And so I think a 2-month time frame is going to give us some good information to see whether or not we think this is something worthwhile to look at. Perhaps as Councillor Zawierski says, something that's bigger than just downtown or more than just simply the summertime. But I think where we are right now, which is the end of June, and trying to go into it, I think focusing on a small area and tying that to specific goals and tasks, I think that will give us an idea whether or not we think this is going to be successful in the long run.
Fred?
I would caution us right off the bat to not put all of our judgments based on 2 months of this summer. That what we're talking about is creating a different mindset in the community, a different mindset downtown overall. This may take more than 2 months to come to the final decision. This works or doesn't work. I think if we really have to dissect this at the end and see, are there trends there? Is there a need for it? Do we see that this is going forward? Is this a great idea, or are we headed in the wrong direction? But I don't think 2 months is going to be the end of an evaluation period. At least I hope it's not.
No, but I think it does give us a good evaluation. All right. So, and the goal might be that we can be able to demonstrate to some of the other community groups like the chamber and that hey, maybe there's an opportunity to partner in something like this for the entire year. So,
Lisa?
Just one more quick question in regards to that green grant. Is that a one-time thing, or is this something we can apply for annually?
I believe it was a 2018 grant, so again, it might be available in 2019, and it was we applied for up to 8 people, of which we had looked primarily at the idea of trying to garden, more grass cutting and stuff like that. So Barb got the email that said, hey, we've reconsidered and you're now in. We don't know if we're in for 1, 2, or all 8 people, but again, from our perspective, we're just, we're happy that we've got at least some funding, and so we might look at some more activities from this. And again, if this is 2019 fund too, we would absolutely apply, as we do for a bunch of grant funds every year for students or seasonal staff. So,
Jay?
I understand that it's probably going to arise out of the strategic priority discussion, but because it's relevant to this vote, could you, before we call the vote, get a quick update on what elements of the plaza are being implemented this summer and when we can expect to see them?
as of right now, so we have Adirondack chairs are being installed on Wednesday, Thursday of this week. We have a Woonerf that should be here, or not. We call it a Woonerf, and for lack of a better term. So it's a platform that we're having is going to be, I think, installed either later this week or early next week downtown. And it's a movable one, movable and adjustable. We have a small dollhouse type structure, I want to call it, for lack of a better. It's going to be I think it's really kind of up to whatever we decide it's going to be. The idea maybe this summer is that it's a visitor information center downtown. That should be here within the next week or so. We have, and then we're going to delineate the area that's between 3rd and the back lane to the north of 3rd on Center Street. So essentially the area that's by the Napier Theater Emporium. We're going to delineate that with flower pots, which arrive next week. So I would expect by the end of next weekend, or next week, July 6th, that we would have that whole area kind of occupied with tables, chairs, games, building. Though again, there'll be some space on 3rd Avenue where we're looking to put the little platform. Whether it most likely we're thinking about either in front of 3rd Avenue Arts, or maybe down a little bit in front of the new hot dog and ice cream place on 3rd next to Cool Cut. So everything's in hand. I think part of the delay had been that there had been we had asked the penitentiary to do some work for us, and in the middle of the work they went into lockdown, and so there's been probably a 2-week loss in time. Otherwise, we would have had that stuff here already. So,
thank you,
Tom.
Are we looking at a place down there for the Christmas tree? Like, I think we were looking at not putting it right in the middle of that intersection, but more down First Street North or Center Street North. Is that something that
are
we're
you
looking
saying
at?
that because it's 6 weeks till Christmas? Did
6 months?
6 months. Sorry, 6 months to Christmas. You know what? To be honest, we haven't talked about that at all right now. So that had not. There had been on one of the conceptual drawings that the Economic Development Committee had. There had been a drawing that showed it off to the side, but I think we have to kind of plan a place where we want to. We'll take a little bit more time this year and look at where we want to do it, or if we want to do it downtown again. So,
Anybody else? Okay, I would just want to commend the Economic Advisory Committee because they have worked their butts off to get this, and all it is a test project. It's not big funds. It's not asking for a whole bunch of stuff, but I think it's really, and as far as Tom, I agree with you, as far as downtown merchants, I think we as a town need to prove this year that we're stepping up and making it, and then I think from there on they will step up and get involved. And this person's going to be 40 hours a week, so it doesn't mean that there might be, but the downtown merchants agreed to open Thursday, Friday, Saturdays to 8 o'clock starting July 5th. So I hope we're shooting for July 5th. But that's kind of the goal, and have some form of entertainment. So yes, I completely agree with Fred. We need to promote everything else around the valley from this this person. It obviously they've got the job description, but it's about trying to create a sense of place. And if we can create a sense of place down there, that's only going to expand. And I'm really super excited. These guys have worked hard. Jay?
Just to piggyback on that, Your Worship, I agree, and I think we should articulate it in words. That is what the downtown business people are putting in. That's the risk they're taking. That's the investment they're making, is altering their hours, which to them is not just altering their business practices. It's upsetting the habits of their lives, and it's risking. They know what business they can expect to do during their normal hours of operation. They don't know what business they can expect to do during these expanded or different hours. And so they are making an investment by taking this risk along with us in hopes of the betterment of all involved. So it's not as though they're not doing anything, not at all.
No, it's going to be an exciting summer. Everybody get downtown. Okay, any more on that? All right, so I've got the motion, I've got the second. Are all in favor? Carried. Okay, 8.1.2, the strategic business plan update. Daryl?
Thank you again. So I'm reading off of, just so everyone has the same, reading off of our corporate priorities document that we have here. So, and some of them I will speak to, most of them I will speak to, and some of them I have either Darren or Mia talk to about in their areas. So, I guess I would like to start at number 1. So economic strategy. So this is the recommendations from the task force. So we have, I guess we've actually implemented one of the small recommendations just right now. So the idea is that we're, of course, we just received those a couple of weeks ago, and our goal is to go through them this summer, to be able to come back to council as part of our budget planning process this fall of what we're going to implement, what changes we're going to make. Of course, we know that there are some things that are bylaw related, where we're going to have to create bylaws or policies, and some of them we're going to have to actually put some dollars behind or change some stuff up. So, so that I look at that as realistically, that's never coming. Like that's not coming off for the next couple of years. Like I look at, there's a number of things that are sort of short, medium, and long-term goals that we've talked about with respect to that. So. I don't know if we want to ask questions during each one, if you have any questions, or if we want to save them.
We're in the habit of attaching timelines to these things, Daryl. So you expect that we'll have work product in front of us in what month?
I would expect the end of September. So let's say October, if we're putting it that way. Beginning of October. So. Okay. Flood mitigation. So we do know, as we've talked about, so some parts of our flood mitigation, we've actually signed an agreement with the province with respect to transfer of ownership for the dikes. We're working on, we've been granted funding for the work for the diking work. We've engaged Stantec to do some conceptual and preliminary design, as well as look at the ideas around. There's an opportunity, just as a bit of a tangent, there's an opportunity through the federal government now, and some of us heard that at FCM, where they're looking at basically trying to fund bigger projects, of which the buy-in is $20 million. Well, we met with the province and with Stantec a couple weeks ago and feel that there's actually a case for us to be able to submit a project like that. The deadline is July 31st. So we're going to be submitting some, and basically this is a lot of the unapproved projects that we've had, that we've submitted for the last 5 years that we're actually going to approve, or going to submit for the federal government strategy. We are currently working on, so again, with respect to the flood mitigation, construction wouldn't start until the winter of this year, and the reason primarily is that most of the work is adjacent to the rivers, and we're not allowed to be into the river area doing dirt work until January. There's a window that is in the middle of winter for us to do. So for us to be, there are some areas we can start earlier than that, but again, from a design and going out to the public for consultation on what we're actually doing, we're probably looking at tendering this thing in October, November, with the idea that we're starting construction in December. So construction would still be complete by May or June of next year for all of the areas that have been approved so far. So not a lot. It's a later start, but still it's not a lot of work. It's a lot. You can get it done before next summer. So, Tom?
At what stage of the process will we have the community consultation? Like, will that be when, where?
So we wouldn't do it until September, just because there's no sense doing them in the summertime. We're going to do just, again, conceptual and some preliminary design. So conceptual is kind of drawing a line on a page and saying this is about where the dike's going to be, but we want to take it past that to kind of say, so here is where the dike could be. Here's what it could look like. Here's what, how it impacts views, etc. So the idea is to have that work done and ready to go to the public in early September. So, Jay?
Daryl, when do you expect to do that unfunded project review with council?
We can do that next Tuesday night if we want to. So, like, it's really not a. There are 8 projects that are unfunded, so we can go through that as part of our committee of the whole meeting discussion. It's been ready to go for a few weeks, and just we've been tackled with other things. So
excellent, and because it's not, strangely, it's not under advocacy. I guess it was an assumption was made. I'd love to see us attach a timeline for expectations around the implementation of any provincially mandated buyout program. I don't know if we need to plan a field trip to the minister's office. I'm not sure if we could get time in the summer, but obviously it's an advocacy issue. At some point, the program has relative terms. The program has been allocated funding, although that hasn't been sourced. The funding's been sourced but not allocated, and so in terms of getting the powers that be to pull the trigger on implementing that program, clearly it's an advocacy issue at this point. No.
So you stole my thunder a bit because I was going to talk about buyouts right away. Okay. So we've actually been meeting with the province for a couple of months, more frequently on buyouts, on specifically the buyout program. And we're actually meeting with them on July 5th to with the idea that so a funding source has been identified. They're actually a lot closer with respect to kind of the framework of what they're looking at for buyouts. They are, I think what's happened right now is that there's this, to be fair, I think this federal program is kind of, they're looking now, of course, if they can if Drumheller can get some federal funding out of this, then it's less money that they have to put into us, which then they can spread around, or they can do more buyouts or more projects. So I think our goal is to be able to have, we had said originally we thought we'd have a goal in June of when we would actually have a framework from them. Our expectation is to still drive that for July to see if we can nail this down, because of course we do have some residents that are quite concerned about their properties and their livelihoods and their lives, because they've been kind of put on hold for 5 years. And we had 3 weeks ago, I think, or 4 weeks ago, it was June 7th actually, we had the province in town, and we went and visited some of these places that would be buyout potentials and talked to the homeowners just to kind of put a face to the pain that their province is kind of inflicting, and which I think was definitely registered with at least one of the people that came out. So, but again,
didn't know that it happened. I'm very pleased to hear that's happened. Thank you.
So we're doing work behind the scenes. I try, if there's stuff to report that we think is sort of milestone part, absolutely we tell that. There's nothing I can tell you emphatically that says, oh, here's a milestone that we think we've met. I think the next milestone hopefully will happen in the next 4 to 6 weeks, and then certainly everyone would know about that. So with respect to buyouts anyway. Anything else on flood mitigation or flooding? No, okay. Communication strategy. So this was one of those that I think we talked about, the idea of actually trying to do better communication as well as more communication with the public and internal and with council and stuff. So it's been a work in progress. We've developed some framework around what we're supposed to be doing. I think it works more times than it doesn't, but we haven't come back with an actual strategy document. It hasn't been drafted yet to actually bring back to council. And again, part of the goals this summer is to get some of those off, those little, I want to call them little niggly things, off the plates and actually in front of council. So I'd look at bringing that back in the middle of September to council for review. So, Fred?
Daryl, I was wondering if as we go down the priority list, wherever Paul's name is, would you substitute whoever is going to be carrying that forward, or will we assume it's just Okay, thanks.
Sure. So in that case, that's going to be Julia / Daryl. So because now both communication and economic development reports through the CAO. So good. Employee housing business case. So this is something that would be through Darren and really Darren and Armia. So, and this was, we recall, this was the idea of trying to look at some alternative housing for seasonal employees. And I think we had discussed this quite regularly early on in the year. And then I think it's just, to be honest, it's just kind of fallen completely off. It was one of those things that we talked about for 2019, and I think it had just fallen off the radar. So, Jay?
I'm asking my colleague Fred to clarify. From what I understand, I think this one can come off. We've identified it as a non-issue in the community.
Okay.
And and we're not going to try to solve problems that don't exist.
Good. Nice work, Darren. Good. That's great.
If you check the housing subcommittee on the task force, it was identified this year that there was an interest by employers in the community, but it really wasn't the employer's place. It was the employees. But I think we recommended that yearly we look at that, and especially in light of the presentation we had from Banff when they talked about housing for employees being a really important part of the whole equation. So I think that's something that we take off as a priority, but yearly we should review and see, through a questionnaire or something to the employers whether that shortage of employees are tied to housing or not. At this point, our questionnaire and the task force said that there is a shortage of workers, but they don't tie it to the housing problem.
And I think it's probably good to develop a strategy still. Like I think not unlike Banff or other communities with a high seasonal employee rate, still good for us to be able to have that. So it maybe changes from business case to strategy, but good.
And I just got an email the other day about a film. One of the guys that was on the task force, and he said that they would love to bring a film here, but they could be here for 3 to 4 months, and they just can't afford the housing and the hotels and stuff like that. So I agree we should take it off as the high priorities, but I totally agree we should keep it monitored. Maybe there's some options there. Tom?
One of the things that we talked about is doing a survey of workers who come to town for the summer and just get their feedback on how did they get accommodation, what did they, what worked, what didn't work, what they would like to see. And I know my daughter at the museum, she helps many of the workers who come from all over Canada, and they manage to find accommodation. It doesn't mean that it's great. So I would kind of like to see a survey of some of these people who have come to town. What did you get? How much did it cost? Where did you get it? That kind of thing.
Could the museum help us with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we've been doing some surveys. The Economic Development Committee has been doing some surveys as well recently, more on the business retention and expansion side, but they're certainly quite, the province is quite willing to help us out with a number of activities related to try to drive up business in the community, so we can definitely ask about doing that. So, any other questions on that or comments? Okay, so cannabis legislation and land use bylaw. So we talked about the land use bylaw earlier today. The legislation will come to us, and I think part of it is one of this, I want to call it a bit of a chicken and egg, and even in hearing the discussion tonight, there have been some changes within the provincial and federal requirements that have actually, like what it looked like 4 or 6 months ago is different than what it looks like now. So from a legislation, we've actually talked about it, that we would have the bylaw in front of everyone for September. So again, we would be ready well in advance of October 17th. So. We have, okay, so just looking at civic solar projects, the idea was to identify one project and actually build it out. So we've met what we've done is we've actually met with ATCO, looked at a number of our facilities to actually look at. So ATCO is one of the things they're trying to do is branch out into solar and some other areas. So they've actually gone and doing some preliminary design of different facilities, the costs to install and operate, and any grants that might be available for us to go forward. I think that the challenge is, well, no, I know the challenge is that even on the small scale, we're looking at something that's almost between $80,000 and $100,000 to kind of install and part of it is because you're not just putting some panels on a roof, but you're actually tying it to your electrical system, and so it's not realistically what I look at is that this is something we would bring back in the fall time as part of budget discussion and determine whether or not council is actually wanting to move forward with that as a capital project in 2019. So.
I take it the look was for me. So community assistance policy was passed, was developed a couple of months ago. We've just started to really roll it out into the community now, and we're starting to get some interest and some feedback on it as well at the same time. Probably the biggest point of it is that through those discussions were that anything over 5,000 would be coming back for council to review. We currently have one that we are reevaluating as it has been proposed as potentially being over the 5,000, but we're doing our own cost analysis on it to see if it is going to exceed the 5,000 or if it's going to fall with below that number. So then we can just move on it internally. The other ones that we're kind of looking at are smaller number figures. There was a presentation last week with the free play and that. So those are the things that we can handle on the administration side of things. So, any questions on community assistance?
We didn't really discuss it at the time, and one of the reasons why we streamlined it that way was for efficiency. But I think I would like to see it included in at least the quarterly reports about the applications received and the grants provided, in particular pointing out anyone who was turned down.
Yeah, and our goal is to also do it as a part of a budget summary too. So at that time of the year, so again, we'd show all of the ones through the year, what we've provided, whether it's in kind and or cash contributions, and then be able to roll that into one report to kind of show here's what we've done for the year since implemented. So
good enough.
Yeah.
The next one is the poverty reduction strategies. So obviously we didn't make the April date on there. It is tied to the community needs assessment that April has been putting a lot of time and effort into in that. She has also updated me on it that there is a grant that she has applied for homelessness to do a bit of a study on it that would tie heavily into this poverty reduction strategy. And so moving forward with it is we're looking for kind of a fall date on that to come back with some information. There also may be opportunity to look at doing it as a committee, whether it be an ad hoc committee or a council designated committee to be able to put some strategies in place moving forward. And if there's we strongly suspect there'll be some funds necessary to move that forward afterwards in the 2019 budget then as well.
And dates, you said fall, but
so when we were having the conversation, we were talking about late October.
Parking, pay, and play. So that was something Greg. So Greg actually did a lot of work on this winter. He had looked at a few different sites. So the Hoodoo site, the Suspension Bridge, as well as the world's largest dinosaur site, and looked at some different pay options. One of the so kind of two scenarios. One was if you match what a lot of public or private parking lots do, for instance, the Calgary, where you basically input your license plate into a kiosk, put in the amount of time you're going to be there, you pay with your credit card or by cash, and then you put that tag on dash of your vehicle. In talking to the companies that do the work, what they do is they say that it works really well if you trust everybody. But as far as places that have a high turnover rate, or we're expected to have a high turnover rate, they spend an inordinate amount of time, staff time, doing bylaw ticketing people to make sure that you're actually, if you're paying for 2 hours, you're actually staying for 2 hours. So that was part of it for him. That was one of those outcomes. The other one was simply putting a gate system in, so not unlike the airport, for instance, where you put in your credit card, and the gate goes up, it goes down. Again, in both of those cases, the capital costs for these things were in the $40,000 to $60,000 range per site. Yeah, it's amazing how much these parking systems are costing. So again, from the idea that if we decided we'd have to come back, I want him to finish the report when he comes back to work and determine whether council wants to proceed with it, and then if we do, where are we looking at for sites for 2019, and of course fund that properly through the capital budget. So, Fred?
Daryl, in my travels, a lot of the places I go to have volunteer kind of donations to maintain sites. So if you've enjoyed this site, help us maintain it. Crow's Nest Pass, there's a community campground there. They just have a really secure kind of pipe affair. You put in, suggested donations, $10 a night, and they seem to do okay. I wonder if pay per play for parking doesn't work, if we could figure out a really good public awareness campaign at the sites that say that it costs money to maintain this site, have a voluntary kind of donation or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Fred. I think that is a good opportunity. I think it'd be good for us to be able to talk to some of those communities to say, so what are you actually receiving in terms of revenue to offset your expenses for that? So, but yeah, I think absolutely that's a good option as well. So, any other questions on that? Barb is working on. She should never put spring to anything when there's an audit stuff. So she's working on the incentive or innovative program. I think it's supposed to say incentive program. So that's a summer that she's looking at. So I think she's looking to bring it back in September. So rec opportunities. We talk about dog parks separately. Toboggan Hill. So we've been discussing. Oh, sorry, Fred.
Apologize, Daryl. Employee incentive, might I suggest that we try to move that up simply because we're moving into a new building. I'd like to see if there's economies of that we have ideas as we move and things like that, that if we're going to save money in the whole process, that I mean, I realize it's hard to quantify, but I really feel really strongly on this, that our people are the best people to find economies, and the sooner we do that, the sooner we find them.
So I think that there's two different parts. So there's a piece in there you talk about. So when I think about, and when I mentioned September, it's about kind of bringing it back to council. So again, if we're meeting in August, then it comes back in August. But the idea is that we're bringing it back. As far as, actually, I've been very impressed with our staff that are moving over there. Some of the ideas that have been looked at already have been really quite good, and both cost saving as well as there's some good time saving movements in there too. So I think that's a great opportunity to give them a fresh perspective with it. But absolutely, as far as something that would be looked at for the whole administration staff, that's something we'd be bringing back as a report to council. And again, it'd be back when we come back, depending on our our schedule that gets looked at later on at council meeting. So I quickly started talking about Toboggan Hills and Trails. So this was really, we'd identified a site. So it's the old ski hill site area. We've been talking to the Passion Play folks about the idea of trying to develop something where either we lease them the land or something like that, and they actually develop the trails as well as develop the toboggan park. So as a matter of fact, it just responded back to Vance today. I'm sorry, I didn't hit send. It's in draft. But anyway, the idea is that we want to meet soon to actually look at what we can do for starting this summer, and the idea to actually have something in place for this fall. So the idea of summer would be trail development, with the fall time kind of hope, depending on snow, of course, is a toboggan hill. So so we're looking at, and that would come back to council because it would be a there's a couple of innovative ideas that they're presenting as far as land ownership questions, and we can talk. That would be something we talk about once it's all firmed up. So, excuse me. Downtown plan, plaza strategy. So I guess we've talked about that already. The idea of the downtown. So again, that's for this year. We're looking at again at the pilot part for this. The idea is that we're going to cost out some of the changes with respect to the plan that was presented by the Economic Development Committee earlier this year, where there was some hardscaping done, like some widening of the sidewalks, some more areas where people can sit and visit or do whatever. So that would be something that we have our transportation consultants costing out because while it might work conceptually, there are some challenges with respect to kind of the road construction and that. So we have to work out that and look at a cost estimate for next year for council. So so kind of a two-parter. The pilot is already in place or coming in place in the next few weeks. And then the idea is to look at what does the actual permanent structure look like and what's it going to cost us once we get some actual hard engineering done. So.
Washroom, is that included in that?
Yes, actually, and I didn't talk about washroom earlier. Thanks for that. When we were in Halifax, several of us had seen these washrooms made out of sea containers, and so I had actually found a company in Edmonton that actually makes these things, and they make them primarily, I think, for the oil industry, but they also make them for communities as well. So I've been waiting for about a week now for a cost estimate for what one would look like for if we put one down. But they're completely self-contained, so we can put this at the Hoodoos, we can put it at the suspension bridge if we decide we want to upgrade the washrooms or change them around there. They have a holding tank for water, a holding tank for wastewater. They're constructed so that you can wash them out quite easily. So quite a big upgrade from what we have now. So the idea is we could look at them for downtown as well as other places, and they're in that $40,000 price range, so not insignificant. But at the same time, when we looked at costs for the Hoodoos last couple of years, they were well in excess of $100,000 for a unit. So, and those units do exist. They're just a very deluxe version of this unit that we looked at, and I don't think anyone had any negative comments from the folks that saw them in Halifax. I think they all worked. They worked well. They were aesthetically fine. So, good. Any questions else on that? I thought I'd talk about dog park down under protective services. So that's okay. So let's see, I'm just looking at some of these asterisk ones. So I think the alternate power generation feasibility study. So again, that was sort of tied into solar. If I recall what we talked about. So again, under a solar project, we talked about with ATCO. Basically, what they've said is that there's not enough solar. You couldn't put enough solar panels on any one of our buildings to be able to offset the electrical consumption of those buildings in a given year. You're going to be able to do partial from there, but you're still going to need electricity for there. And realistically, you're going to be able to feed very little into the grid, if anything, if that's the case. So. Post-secondary education strategy. So we have not. There's been no work done on that, and that's something that would be done through community services, so through Darren and April. But we haven't looked at anything to do with that. I think that if I recall, that was more us trying to align to see if there was a possibility to bring more post-secondary to the community. Is that we're trying to align them up? No. Tom?
Our economic Task Force Education Committee had some recommendations and suggestions that are in the mix.
So I think that again, that probably goes back to the point number one of looking at some of these under there. So
Yeah.
recycling collection feasibility. So that's something that we've looked at a little bit. Of course, part of the Economic Development Task Force looked at it as well. I think recycling, whether it's recycling that we think of as the blue box or blue cart, or it's more of a composting part, there are some things there are some easier efficiencies. For instance, it's some bigger wins if we want to look at composting. But anyway, the goal is to be able to bring that back this fall for us. So we've talked back to council for consideration for 2019. So again, whether we want to do a curbside collection for recyclables, or we want to look at curbside collection for organics, or a drop off, or a bit of both. So there's a number of different options in there. So. And then Parks and Rec Master Plan terms of reference. So this was, again, wanting to update or create our master plan. I think it's update. I think we have an old master plan. So it's basically creating a new one and looking at what do we want to do. And so this is something that really involves both infrastructure, community services, as well as development. So that's something that we would look at for later this fall, with the idea of hopefully bringing it back before council budget deliberations. So, Tom?
That would include Newcastle area. We've had some discussion on Newcastle Beach area. And
it would be everything from East Cooley to Nakmai. So it would include all of the public, anything that's park and rec, or anything related to trails, or anything that we have that's existing right now, as well as proposed. So way up to, whether it's the Wayne Playground, or the Rosedale Playground, or parks in Nakmai, it would include everything. So. Okay, so advocacy, talked about just thinking about transportation projects. So I've got a number of updates on some of these things. So we've talked about just the concrete islands at 2nd Avenue West, so right out to my lovely right. So that's included as part of the construction work this year to actually remove that island, put some no left turns during busy times period, so not unlike you have in other centers, and then look at the success or failure of that change. Right. So the idea would be that it was put in originally because of an engineering study that was done, where a number of changes were made because of poor traffic flow within the community. So if we're changing it back, we might have to look at what do those changes look like for us. So, but again, it's scheduled to be part of the work this summer, so just to actually remove that island. So put a sign in. Sorry, which one? Sorry.
What about the other one that's down by, I guess would be Winners?
Winners Travel Lodge. No, so the turn lane that is at the Liquor Depot Travel Lodge area, Alberta Transportation just confirmed last week that that's not coming out. That's part of an overall plan for pedestrian crossing there. So that island, that I think one of the misnomers is that that's actually a second travel lane in there, and actually it was intended from Alberta Transportation's perspective to always be a turning lane into those businesses in there. So they're not willing to look at removing that as part of the work in there. So,
but they are looking at improving that crosswalk.
Yes, as part of the work. So there's work there this summer that is they're going to resurface that piece of Highway 9 from the Gordon Taylor Bridge to basically the Fountain Tire. Fountain Tire. And so that's kind of the tie into the piece that they did a couple of years ago. So basically that whole piece in there is going to be resurfaced. There's going to be new curb and gutter installed in there, and some of the islands. And part of that work is going to be a new signalized crossing at Grove. So there will be so it won't just simply be a crosswalk sign, but it's going to be the flashing LED sign, that the kind of modern stuff. So it'll be the side. So it'll be very similar to what's in Airdrie,
Airdrie.
as an example that everyone seems to think about Airdrie first. So it's going to look just like that. So there's going to be 3 lights across the middle there, and they're going to put sort of a different kind of line painting in there, so it's going to last a lot longer for a crosswalk. So
Great. So, and then, correct me if I'm wrong, but then they're going to resurface Gordon Taylor Bridge in 2019, or do upgrades to Gordon Taylor?
So I think that so what I heard unofficially the other day from them is that they need to do, they've done some testing. Of course, they just had it down to 1 lane each way a few weeks ago. They're just gathering the engineering report, but they know that they have to redo the concrete. They're pretty confident they have to redo the concrete deck, and so it's so as part of that work, they're going to revisit or going to take out the one side of sidewalk that I think council had asked for. So right now there's a sidewalk on both sides. So they're actually quite willing to look at taking out one side of the sidewalk. There's some reasons that they actually want to do it. It's less weight on the bridge, which will make the bridge last longer. The downside is right now, and again, this is all unofficial, is that it's expected to be a very lengthy project, like months and months of work to do that work, because it means that they're actually taking it down to the steel and redoing the steel on the bridge deck. So, and I think they're looking at that in either 19 or 20. So, but again, that's all unofficial right now. We don't. Of course, there's capital budgets that the province has to go through, and they have to finalize what the work is they're actually doing in there. So it's not for sure yet. So,
Your Worship, before we go any further, I'd like to make a motion that we go in camera. There's some things I want to talk about as it relates to these transportation projects that may be related to privacy.
Have a motion? Lisa? Jay? Or Christine second? All in favor? Carried.